The security guard's heavy hand reached for his radio as his eyes scanned the woman standing on the polished marble floor. Dr. Amara Washington stood perfectly still. Her designer briefcase gripped tightly in her hand as an icy silence gripped the main lobby of Heritage Community Bank. It was exactly 2:47 on a Tuesday afternoon when the assistant manager stepped forward, his voice cutting through the quiet room to declare that the bank did not serve her kind of clientele. He did not know that the woman he was trying to humiliate was actually the newly appointed chief executive officer of the entire banking institution. For 12 years, this flagship branch had operated on unspoken assumptions, but within the next few hours, a corporate legal team would descend upon this lobby like a hurricane. Amara had walked through the heavy glass doors wearing a tailored charcoal suit, her steps echoing with natural authority as she approached the premium banking counter. The young teller behind the glass, Jessica, had looked up with an expression of deep irritation before pointing aggressively toward the basic service windows across the room. When Amara requested executive services, the atmosphere instantly shifted from cold dismissiveness to active hostility as the assistant manager Bradley Mitchell emerged from his back office. Bradley was 35, clean-shaven, and possessed the unearned confidence of someone who had never had his authority questioned by anyone. He crossed his arms tightly over his chest, speaking much louder than necessary to ensure every customer in the lobby could hear his patronizing words. Nearby, a young woman named Sarah Chen sat with her laptop, having accidentally captured the entire confrontation on an active live stream that was already gaining hundreds of viewers. Bradley insisted that executive banking required $250,000 in assets and extensive documentation of what he loudly called legitimate income sources. Amara did not argue or raise her voice. She simply placed her monogrammed leather briefcase on the counter, checking her phone as the clock ticked closer to the scheduled 3:30 board meeting. The tension in the air became heavier as Regional Manager Patricia Kane stepped out of the executive suite to join Bradley at the counter. Patricia was a sharp-eyed corporate operator who immediately supported her assistant manager without asking a single question about the woman standing before them. She adjusted her glasses and began lecturing Amara about federal regulatory protocols and strict know-your-customer requirements, implying that Amara's presence was inherently suspicious. Amara calmly opened her wallet to retrieve her identification, briefly exposing a flash of a platinum American Express Centurion card, before sliding her driver's license across the marble surface. Patricia barely glanced at the identification document, instead demanding proof of funds, employment verification, and a comprehensive written explanation of her business affairs. They completely missed the VIP parking validation ticket sticking out of Amara's briefcase, which granted exclusive access to the restricted executive garage level. Meanwhile, Sarah's live stream was exploding across social media platforms, with the viewer count skyrocketing past 900, as comments flooded the screen, labeling the situation as blatant discrimination. Amara maintained her absolute composure, telling the managers that she was simply trying to access banking services at an institution she knew very well. Bradley laughed openly at her statement, mockingly reminding her that Heritage Community Bank had been serving the city's elite business community for over 75 years. Patricia then stepped even closer, stating that if Amara continued to be evasive and failed to provide secondary corporate documentation, they would have no choice but to force her off the premises. The conflict escalated further when District Manager Robert Hayes was patched into the teller's large video monitor from the regional headquarters, his face filling the screen. Hayes demanded an immediate status report, and Patricia quickly reported that an uncooperative individual was attempting to demand premium services without proper credentials or verifiable business purposes. From the large monitor on the wall, Robert Hayes nodded grimly and instructed the branch staff to proceed with standard security protocols to remove the individual immediately. 2 armed security guards moved into position near the main exits, their boots clicking loudly against the marble floor as the lobby grew completely silent. An elderly customer named Mrs. Roosevelt, who had banked with the institution for 4 decades, stood up from the waiting area to voice her deep concern. She called out to Bradley, advising him to check his database before making terrible assumptions. But Bradley completely ignored her to focus on his display of authority. He turned back to Amara, giving her an ultimatum of exactly 5 minutes to produce additional documentation or face physical removal by security. Amara looked at her phone, typed a swift 4-word message that read, "Code 7. Initiate immediately," and calmly replied that 5 minutes would be more than sufficient. By this time, the live stream link was spreading rapidly across local networks, causing the bank's name to begin trending as an active public relations crisis unfolded online. Other customers in the lobby stopped their transactions entirely, some watching with visible discomfort, while others recorded the scene from different angles on their mobile devices. Amara stood perfectly still, her posture relaxed, and her breathing controlled as she advised Bradley to check page 47 of the Corporate Employee Handbook. She specifically cited the section regarding mandatory customer service standards and the strict legal obligation to treat every single individual with absolute dignity and respect. Bradley's confident expression faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered his aggressive tone, claiming he was protecting the bank's security. At exactly 3 and 5 minutes, Bradley made the most critical error of his professional career by loudly ordering the security team to escort Amara out the front doors. The head of security, Marcus Thompson, who possessed over 2 decades of experience with the company, hesitated as an unsettling feeling took hold of him. He looked at Amara's steady demeanor and the pristine condition of her monogrammed briefcase, realizing that something about this entire scenario was completely wrong. However, corporate protocol required him to support branch management decisions during an active dispute, so he took a slow step forward toward the counter. Mrs. Roosevelt intervened again, walking directly into the center of the lobby to declare that this hostile treatment was a complete disgrace to the bank's history. Patricia Kane immediately spun around sharply, telling the elderly woman not to interfere in a highly sensitive security matter that was being handled by staff. Bradley turned his attention back to Amara, beginning a loud countdown from 10 to 1 to finalize the removal process in front of the gathered audience. Amara calmly unzipped her leather briefcase, and every eye in the room watched with intense focus as she withdrew a single elegant corporate business card. She placed the card firmly on the marble counter right in front of Bradley, who glanced down at it with a dismissive sneer on his face. The card read, "Dr. Amara Washington, Chief Executive Officer, Heritage Community Bank," causing the color to instantly drain from Patricia Kane's face as she leaned over. Patricia's voice cracked into a terrified whisper as she muttered that it was impossible while the live stream viewers reached over 3,000 concurrent users. At exactly 3 and 5 minutes, Bradley made the most critical error of his professional career by loudly ordering the security team to escort Amara out the front doors. The head of security, Marcus Thompson, who possessed over 2 decades of experience with the company, hesitated as an unsettling feeling took hold of him. He looked at Amara's steady demeanor and the pristine condition of her monogrammed briefcase, realizing that something about this entire scenario was completely wrong. However, corporate protocol required him to support branch management decisions during an active dispute. so he took a slow step forward toward the counter. Mrs. Roosevelt intervened again, walking directly into the center of the lobby to declare that this hostile treatment was a complete disgrace to the bank's history. Patricia Kane immediately spun around sharply, telling the elderly woman not to interfere in a highly sensitive security matter that was being handled by staff. Bradley turned his attention back to Amara, beginning a loud countdown from 10 to 1 to finalize the removal process in front of the gathered audience. Amara calmly unzipped her leather briefcase, and every eye in the room watched with intense focus as she withdrew a single, elegant corporate business card. She placed the card firmly on the marble counter right in front of Bradley, who glanced down at it with a dismissive sneer on his face. The card read, Dr. Amara Washington, Chief Executive Officer, Heritage Community Bank, causing the color to instantly drain from Patricia Kane's face as she leaned over. Patricia's voice cracked into a terrified whisper as she muttered that it was impossible, while the live stream viewers reached over 3,000 concurrent users. At exactly 3:18, the heavy glass door swung open as 3 high-ranking executives in dark designer suits walked into the lobby with military precision. Chief of Staff Ellen Rodriguez led the group, flanked by General Counsel Maria Santos and Compliance Director James Wright. Their faces expressionless and severe. Ellen walked past the stunned branch managers, stopped directly in front of Amara, and offered a formal apology for the unacceptable delay in her reception. She informed the CEO that the emergency board meeting had been successfully relocated to the primary executive conference room on the 47th floor. Bradley opened his mouth to speak, but his throat was completely dry, and no sound came out as he stood frozen behind the marble counter. Patricia stood entirely motionless, knowing that the arrival of the general counsel meant an immediate internal investigation with severe legal consequences had begun. Mrs. Roosevelt walked over to Amara, expressing her deep sorrow that the bank's cultural values had deteriorated so dramatically under the current regional leadership. Amara thanked her warmly, assuring the longtime customer that her integrity was highly valued and would be remembered during the structural changes ahead. On the wall monitor, Robert Hayes attempted to speak, stammering that there had been a minor communication breakdown between the regional office and the branch. Amara looked directly into the camera lens, informing Hayes that they would be discussing his communication breakdown in explicit detail during the upcoming session. Amara updated her tablet interface, officially moving the emergency board meeting to 4 o'clock and requiring full attendance from every single voting member. James Wright was already using his digital device to log precise timestamps, employee identification numbers, and specific statements made during the 20-minute confrontation. He noted potential violations of multiple federal statutes, including the Fair Housing Act and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which carried massive financial penalties. Amara lifted her official CEO identification badge from her briefcase, clipping it securely to her charcoal jacket as the corporate logo caught the light. Sarah's live stream had now surged past 6,000 viewers, with the comment section transforming into a rapid river of shocked reactions and viral hashtags. Bradley stared blankly at the shining gold badge, his mind completely unable to comprehend how a corporate executive could arrive without a massive security detail. He began to stammer an excuse about following security guidelines, but Amara cut him off, asking what specific policy authorized the interrogation of clients based on appearance. She demanded to know which section of the employee handbook permitted staff to discuss a customer's personal financial business loudly in public spaces. Patricia tried to claim they were simply protecting the asset portfolio from potential fraud, but her defense was met with absolute silence from the legal team. Amara turned to Patricia, asking how many white customers had been forced to prove the legitimacy of their income before receiving basic service. Patricia's complete inability to answer the question served as a devastating confirmation of the systemic bias that had taken root within the branch's operations. James Wright stepped forward, reading direct statistical data from his compliance tablet that detailed customer service discrepancies over the last 6 months. The data revealed that minority customers faced significantly longer wait times and a 47% higher rate of additional documentation requests compared to other demographics. Furthermore, the bank was already facing 3 separate lending discrimination lawsuits with combined financial damages stretching into millions of dollars. The news of the incident had reached national media outlets, and Ellen's phone was buzzing continuously with urgent requests for official statements from major television networks. Amara looked around the marble lobby one last time before instructing Marcus Thompson to escort Bradley Mitchell and Patricia Kane up to the executive suite. The 2 managers walked toward the private elevators with hollow expressions, looking as though they were being marched to an inevitable professional execution. The elevator ride up 47 floors was entirely silent, the rapid ascent leaving the disgraced managers trapped with the reality of their actions. Upstairs, the executive conference room was already packed with 12 influential board members sitting around a massive polished mahogany table. Board Chairman David Sterling called the emergency session to order, his voice grave, as he introduced the severe crisis that threatened their reputation. Amara activated the room's advanced projection system, displaying real-time digital analytics that showed the incident trending #1 across major media platforms. They watched high-definition security footage of the entire lobby confrontation, capturing every patronizing word uttered by the branch management team in perfect audio clarity. When the video file finished playing, the large conference room remained completely silent for nearly a minute as the board members absorbed the disaster. General Counsel Maria Santos broke the silence, delivering a severe legal risk assessment that outlined massive potential fines from federal regulatory agencies. She estimated that a potential class action lawsuit resulting from this viral footage could expose the banking corporation to over $50 million in financial damages. Board member Jennifer Walsh addressed Bradley directly, demanding an immediate explanation for his flagrant violation of core corporate customer service protocols. Bradley stood shakily at the end of the table, whispering that he genuinely believed he was protecting the institution from suspicious transaction activity. Walsh pressed him further, demanding to know exactly what characteristics of the CEO's physical presence had triggered his suspicion in the first place. Bradley remained completely silent, unable to articulate his internal biases in front of the highest corporate authorities of the institution. Patricia tried to intervene, repeating the claim that high-asset fraud was a common threat that required aggressive verification measures by ground-level staff. Maria Santos immediately countered her statement, noting that Patricia's 12-year employment record showed absolutely 0 instances of white customers being challenged in a similar manner. James Wright added that the statistical evidence pointed directly to a systematic culture of discriminatory practices, rather than an isolated incident by a single employee. Board member Thomas Anderson, a former federal prosecutor, stated that the data proved the existence of a deeply flawed institutional culture that required immediate eradication. Chairman Sterling turned the floor over to Amara, asking for her strategic recommendation on how the corporation should respond to the public crisis. Amara presented 3 distinct paths forward, starting with option 1, which involved minimizing the situation through a private financial settlement, and internal discipline. She explained that this approach would only provide short-term protection for the stock price, while guaranteeing total long-term regulatory catastrophe for the business. Option 2 involved partial reform, meaning the immediate termination of the involved ground staff, followed by standard corporate sensitivity training for remaining personnel. She rejected this option as well, stating it failed to address the root systemic issues and would inevitably lead to a repeat crisis. Amara strongly recommended Option 3, which demanded a complete organizational transformation through a comprehensive policy overhaul and industry-leading accountability measures. This plan included mandatory third-party compliance monitoring, extensive bias awareness training for all employment tiers, and the creation of a massive community investment fund. The Chief Financial Officer, Ronald Park, reviewed the financial projections, stating that initial implementation would cost over $2 million within the first 6 months. Amara reminded the board that $2 million for absolute structural reform was a minor expense compared to a $50 million class action judgment. She displayed historical data from major banking settlements, proving that institutions that failed to address internal discrimination were routinely devastated by federal penalties. Chairman Sterling called for an immediate vote on Option 3, and all 12 board members raised their hands in unanimous approval of the transformation. At exactly 5:23, Bradley Mitchell's employment contract was officially terminated for severe misconduct and violation of civil rights standards. Patricia Kane and Regional Manager Robert Hayes were issued immediate termination notices within the hour, their access to corporate networks instantly deactivated. The next morning, the flagship branch opened its doors under an entirely transformed operational framework designed to guarantee equitable treatment for all clients. Teams of newly appointed compliance advocates were stationed throughout the banking floor, tasked with actively monitoring interactions and assisting customers with specialized needs. HR Director Margaret Foster convened a mandatory assembly announcing that every single employee would complete 40 hours of intensive cultural competency training immediately. The company also launched a specialized digital application that allowed patrons to report instances of unprofessional treatment directly to the executive office. Sarah Chen returned to the location as an invited corporate guest, broadcasting a live follow-up interview with local news teams regarding the rapid changes. She praised the CEO's decisive leadership, noting that the speed of the structural overhaul was unprecedented within the conservative financial sector. The initial community investment fund was doubled to over $1 million, specifically targeted towards supporting minority-owned businesses and local financial literacy. Mrs. Roosevelt met privately with Amara in the executive office, expressing immense pride in the transformation of the institution her late husband had helped build. Compliance data compiled over the following weeks demonstrated an immediate equalization of service times across all client demographics at the flagship branch. Customer satisfaction ratings experienced an unprecedented 89% increase, while employee confidence metrics rose significantly following the structural training sessions. The new internal equity standards went far beyond basic federal legal mandates, establishing permanent quarterly audits conducted by independent civil rights firms. Executive financial compensation was also directly tied to the successful achievement of diversity, equity, and inclusion performance metrics across all regional sectors. Meanwhile, Bradley Mitchell spent his days watching national news reports that analyzed his termination and the wider conversation regarding systemic corporate bias. He received an unexpected communication from the Chief of Staff's office, offering him a fully funded opportunity to enroll in a comprehensive diversity education program. Amara believed that true leadership required offering a path toward personal transformation rather than relying solely on punitive professional exclusion. Bradley accepted the offer, beginning his remediation process by volunteering at local financial literacy workshops to serve communities he had previously dismissed. The radical restructuring of the banking institution quickly drew the attention of academic researchers, eventually becoming a prominent corporate case study. Amara was invited to headline major national financial conferences, where she shared her strategic blueprint for executing rapid cultural change during high-stakes crises. The physical lobby where the confrontation occurred was transformed into a welcoming community space, symbolizing a permanent victory over systemic prejudice and arrogance. 6 months later, Amara stood before thousands of banking executives at a national convention, delivering a powerful address on corporate accountability and moral courage. The final compliance reports indicated a massive surge in new account openings within historically underserved urban neighborhoods across the state. Sarah Chen's journalism career flourished as she continued to highlight stories of systemic reform inspired by the events she had recorded on her phone. The legacy of that Tuesday afternoon became a turning point, proving that a single individual's refusal to accept injustice can successfully rebuild a multi-million-dollar institution. Every day, people continue to enter spaces where they are judged by appearances, but the story of Dr. Amara Washington stands as an enduring testament to the power of dignity, intelligence, and decisive action over ignorance. The ripple effect of the structural transformation inside Heritage Community Bank quickly began to change the landscape of the entire financial district. Financial regulatory agencies took notice of the newly implemented equity standards, using them as a blueprint to update national banking inspection guidelines. Amara was appointed as a chief advisor to the Federal Committee on Equitable Economic Integration, allowing her to influence policy on a massive scale. Inside the flagship branch, the atmosphere was completely unrecognizable from the hostile environment that had existed 6 months prior. Jessica, the young teller who had initially directed Amara to the basic service counter, had excelled under the new comprehensive training program. Her natural empathy and newfound understanding of corporate equity had earned her a promotion to lead customer experience specialist. She now personally trained all incoming branch employees, ensuring that no customer would ever experience the dismissiveness that had once plagued the lobby. Marcus Thompson continued to lead the security division, but his team's focus had completely shifted from aggressive enforcement to proactive hospitality and community protection. The Community Advisory Board met monthly in the main lobby, providing a transparent forum where everyday citizens could voice their financial needs directly to the executive leadership team. As the year drew to a close, the financial performance data revealed that doing the right thing was also incredibly profitable for the bank. The massive influx of new commercial accounts from minority-owned enterprises had driven the institution's asset portfolio to historic heights, completely erasing the temporary stock dip. The corporate case study detailing Amara's decisive crisis management was officially integrated into the core curriculum of top-tier business schools across the nation. Bradley Mitchell successfully completed his intensive 6-month educational program, transforming his initial ignorance into a deep commitment to community advocacy. He accepted a full-time position with a nonprofit organization dedicated to expanding affordable housing credit, frequently citing his past mistakes as a reminder of the vital importance of financial fairness. The story of Heritage Community Bank became an enduring legend in the business world, a definitive proof that institutional bias could be systematically dismantled through absolute transparency and unwavering moral courage. Amara continued to walk through the shining marble lobby every single morning, not just as the leader who saved a multi-million-dollar corporation, but as the woman who turned a moment of profound injustice into a lasting monument for human dignity and equal respect. The deep cultural shift within the financial sector began to influence neighboring institutions, as competing firms realized they could no longer ignore their own internal operational biases. Amara received numerous invitations to join international economic boards, bringing her philosophy of radical corporate transparency to global financial entities that were struggling with regulatory compliance. Back in Chicago, the flagship branch became a certified training center where branch managers from across the Midwest traveled to observe the successful integration of compliance advocates on the banking floor. The specialized equity application that had been developed during the peak of the crisis was now being licensed by 20 major financial groups, establishing a new industry-wide benchmark for immediate dispute resolution. Jessica's promotion to customer experience specialist allowed her to launch a youth mentorship program funded entirely by the bank's expanded community investment fund. This initiative provided high school students from underserved neighborhoods with direct pathways into corporate finance careers, ensuring the next generation of bankers would reflect the true diversity of the community. Marcus Thompson's updated security manual, which emphasized verbal de-escalation and cultural awareness over physical intimidation, was officially adopted by the National Association of Security Professionals. The marble lobby was no longer just a place for commercial transactions. It had evolved into a vibrant community anchor where trust had been painstakingly rebuilt from the ground up. By the time the annual shareholder report was published, Heritage Community Bank had achieved the highest consumer trust rating in its 75-year history, accompanied by a record-breaking 92% employee retention rate. The legal team, led by Maria Santos, successfully closed the final pending historical discrimination lawsuits, with the plaintiffs publicly praising the bank's total systemic overhaul as part of the formal settlement agreements. Sarah Chen's investigative documentary series on corporate accountability, which featured Amara's story as the central narrative, won a prestigious national media award for its profound impact on civil rights journalism. Bradley Mitchell's work with the affordable housing nonprofit flourished, and he occasionally collaborated with James Wright to ensure local community development projects received adequate funding from the bank's specialized lending program. At the annual corporate gala, Chairman David Sterling presented Amara with a Lifetime Achievement Award for institutional courage, noting that her leadership had saved the soul of the organization during its darkest hour. Amara accepted the honor, not for herself, but on behalf of every individual who had ever been made to feel unseen or unwelcome in a place they rightfully belonged. Standing before the gleaming glass windows of the executive tower, she looked out over the sprawling city, knowing that the journey toward true economic equality was long, but her institution had firmly chosen to walk on the right side of history.